taking. Obiako has always been a strange one, said Mwakibie. I have heard that many years ago, when his father had not been dead very long, he had gone to consult the oracle. The oracle said to him, "Your dead father wants you to sacrifice a goat to him." Do you know what he told the oracle? He said, "Ask my dead father if he ever had a fowl when he was alive." Everybody laughed heartily except Okonkwo, who laughed uneasily because, as the saying goes, an old woman is always uneasy when dry bones are mentioned in a proverb. Okonkwo remembered his own father. At last, the young man who was pouring out the wine held up half a horn of the thick white dregs and said, "What we are eating is finished." "We have seen it," the others replied. "Who will drink the dregs?" he asked. "Whoever has a job in hand," said Idigo, looking at Wakibie's eldest son, Igwelo, with a malicious twinkle in his eye. Everybody agreed that Igwelo should drink the dregs. He accepted the half-full horn from his brother and drank it. As Idigo had said, Igwelo had a job in hand because he had married his first wife a month or two before. The thick dregs of palm wine were supposed to be good for men who were going into their wives. After the wine had been drunk, Okonkwo laid his difficulties before Wakibie. "I have come to you for help," he said. "Perhaps you can already guess what it is. I have cleared a farm but have no yams to sow. I know what it is to ask a man to trust another with his yams, especially these days when young men are afraid of hard work. I am not afraid of work. The lizard that jumped from the high Iroko tree to the ground said he would praise himself if no one else did. I began to fend for myself at an age when most people still stuck at their mother's breasts. If you give me some seeds, I shall not fail you." Wakibie cleared his throat. "It pleases me to see a young man like you these days, when our youth has gone so soft. Many young men have come to me to ask for yams, but I have refused because I knew they would just dump them in the earth and leave them to be choked by weeds. When I say no to them, they think I am hard-hearted. But it is not so. Eneke, the bird, says that since men have learned to shoot without missing, he has learned to fly without perching. I have learned to be stingy with my yams. But I can trust you. I know it as I look at you. As our father said, you can tell a ripe corn by its look. I shall give you twice 400 yams. Go ahead and prepare your farm." Okonkwo thanked him again and again and went home feeling happy. He knew that Wakibie would not refuse him, but he had not expected he would be so generous. He had not hoped to get more than 400 seeds. He would now have to make a bigger farm. He hoped to get another 400 yams from one of his father's friends in Isuzu. Sharecropping was a very slow way of building up a band of one's own. After all the toil, one only got a third of the harvest. But for a young man whose father had no yams, there was no other way. And what made it worse in Okonkwo's case was that he had to support his mother and 2 sisters from meager harvest. And supporting his mother also meant supporting his father. He could not be expected to cook and eat while her husband. She could not be expected to cook and eat while her husband starved. And so at a very early age, when he was striving desperately to build a barn through sharecropping, Okonkwo was also fending for his father's house. It was like pouring grains of corn into a bag full of holes. His mother and sisters worked hard enough, but they grew women's crops like cocoyams, beans, cassava, yam. The king of crops was a man's crop. Let me repeat this line. His mother and sisters worked hard enough, but they grew women's crops like cocoyams, beans, and cassava. Yam, the king of crops, was a man's crop. The year that Okonkwo took 800 seed yams from Achebe was the worst year in living memory. Nothing happened at its proper time. It was either too early or too late. It seemed as if the world had gone mad. The first rains were late, and when they came, lasted only a brief moment. The blazing sun returned, more fierce than it had ever been known, and scorched all the green that had appeared with the rains. The earth burned like hot coals and roasted all the yams that had been sown. Like all good farmers, Okonkwo had begun to sow with the first rains. He had sown 400 seeds when the rains dried up and the heat returned. He watched the sky all day for signs of rain clouds and lay awake all night. In the morning, he went back to his farm and saw the withering tendrils. He had tried to protect them from the smoldering earth by making rings of thick sisal leaves around them. But by the end of the day, the sisal rings were burned dry and gray. He changed them every day and prayed that the rain might fall in the night. But the drought continued for 8 market weeks, and the yams were killed. Some farmers had not planted their yams yet. They were the lazy, easygoing ones who always put off clearing their farms as long as they could. This year, they were the wise ones. They sympathized with their neighbors with much shaking of the head, but inwardly they were happy for what they took to be their own foresight. Okonkwo planted what was left of his seed yams when the rains finally returned. He had one consolation. The yams he had sown before the drought were his own, the harvest of the previous year. He still had the 800 from Achebe and the 400 from his father's friend, so he would make a fresh start. But the year had gone mad. Rain fell as he had never fallen before. For days and nights together it poured down in the violent torrents and washed away the yam heaps. The trees were uprooted and deep gorges appeared everywhere. Then the rain became less violent, but it went from day to day without a pause. The spell of sunshine which always came in the middle of the wet season did not appear. The yams put on luxuriant green leaves, but every farmer knew that without sunshine, the tubers would not grow. That year, the harvest was sad, like a funeral, and many farmers wept as they dug up the miserable rotting yams. One man tied his cloth to a tree branch and hanged himself. Okonkwo remembered that tragic year with a cold shiver throughout the rest of his life. It always surprised him when he thought of it later that he did not sink under the load of despair. He knew that he was a fierce fighter, and that year had been enough to break the heart of a lion. Since I survived that year, he would always say, I shall survive anything. He put it down to his inflexible will. His father, Unoka, who was then an ailing man, had said to him during that terrible harvest month, do not despair. I know you will not despair. You have a manly and a proud heart. A proud heart can survive a general failure because such a failure does not prick its pride. It is more difficult and more bitter when a man fails alone. Unoka was like that in his last days. His love of talk had grown with age and sickness. It tried Okonkwo's patience beyond words. The end of chapter 3. What a chapter. What amazing themes are evoking from this. What makes you resilient? Is it the anticipation of a good harvest? Or is it the fact that you trust your ability to toil, to work hard, because you almost know that hard work guarantees a good harvest for you? Is it about your ability to provide for your family, or your agility to serve your wives? So many themes raised in this chapter. I would like to hear what you think. Thank you, and good night.